Hello and welcome to this one-hour webinar. I'm Finn from Academy out of Barcelona on a slightly unstable internet connection. I'm going to bring you 60 busy minutes with new features coming to supply chain management, and actually some of them being here already. This is not learning, this is presentation and hopefully inspiration, because there's so many things in it, as you'll see. And I guess there's no way that you could keep focused for a full 60 minutes, but then remember, you get a replay link after this webinar. But do try to stay alert. Once in a while, I'll try to speak up and be clear. Got a few warnings in there. There's something really important happening, and automatically too. So you really have to be on your toes with this. So this is not just about the new features, browsing through those and dropping a few hints here and there. It's also a clear warning about things that's going to happen automatically, and you should be aware of that. I'm here on my own today. Andreas Luchak, my good colleague and expert on manufacturing, supply chain management, and so many other things. He's an expert, right? So he's busy doing other things. So today, it's me, Finn, presenting supply chain management. Let's get on with it and see what I have in store. I tried to format it in a presentable way. And after going through this, I will have a look at the question and answer session. And we've got a free video coming around at the end of this webinar. But for now, let's just have a look at these features in here. So the session will cover, as advertised on the sign up page, comprehensive core capabilities, resilient supply chain and visibility, enable that. Doesn't sound too bad. And world-class service, health, and execution. Straight out of the horse's own mouth. Well, Microsoft, that is kind of, well, you know, bingo kind of thing. So what I've done is I've changed it around and rather like to stick to the facts, the release plan that Microsoft has published sort of a month ago. And since this is a release plan for the next 6 months, a lot of this is, well, not able to demonstrate. So there's no hands-on demonstrations part of this webinar. Inspirational it's going to be. And it's going to be a lot of text flowing around on this screen. We try to focus on some of the things and leave the rest. I'm not going to do read aloud too much. I think be on your toes, especially with the warnings coming around a couple of times today. So the presentation order, distributed hybrid topology, you know, that you could set up things that could help you around with the workload, making things moving thick and fast. That's a lot of the things that Microsoft is adding. Also in finance, as I covered in a webinar yesterday, being available for replay for those of you who watched it, and there's be a replay link on our website later on today. Inventory and logistics. Now that's a place where I could be for a day or so, because there's so many things happening to inventory and logistics. One thing is distributed hybrid topology is a fairly new topic, sort of going backwards with local, not allowed to call it servers, but the idea of local capabilities. But in inventory and logistics, lots of new things and old things being improved as well. The list in here is huge, really. Manufacturing, fewer things, but good things happening. And then for the planning, basically, optimizing on the, well, planning optimization tool that was added, and now getting more and more functionality. Typical Microsoft, you know, we add a service, a capability, or whatever, and then either add, improve, fix, or whatever over the next well, period. kind of thing. And then in product information management, adding more things about product lifecycle management. And in here, there's I don't know if you've seen the release list in here with notes on it. It's huge, really. I mentioned that already. I'm not going to spend more time on mentioning it's huge. Just going to show you, actually. But I got another thing coming. Some of you guys, of course, have been doing the exam. Some of you are going to do it later on. And especially for those who haven't done it yet, you want to be aware of exam changes. Nothing big, really, to this one. Just a few changes in here. And be on your toes with that. Of course, it's in our live online course in November when we got another MB330, and Microsoft has changed a bit on docs as well. So not much, but I'm going to mention it at the end of this webinar. So let's get started. Not a question answer session. That's going to be at the end. So if you got any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat. And then Alison, who is with me here today from the UK, is going to help me modify the questions, and let's see. Right. So first, wait, because there's more. Not just this listing. There's going to be warnings and spoiler alert. You could think of that in two ways, and I want to alert you about spoilers that could come around from Microsoft if you're not on your toes. Now, it's all in a good meaning, of course, but you need to be aware of things are going to be enabled by default with the release in here. Now, enabled by default, and some of these ones are going to be turned on by default, and then some of these ones are going to be mandatory later on. So one thing is that we, with the 10.0.21, and I think we're already publicly on the 22, but anyway, there are features that are being turned on default, right? Some of the ones have been turned on by default can be disabled, so not too bad, I guess. Might get some surprises, but hey, I could switch it off in the feature management normally. But then note the warning, the yellow part that I've highlighted. You need to be very much aware of lots of functionality actually going to be mandatory. Can't switch it off anymore from 22 release wave 1. I know it's 6 months away from now where we got to see, or 5 probably, because we see the announcement of release wave 1 in 22. But then over the next 6 months or so, whatever after that, you could expect some of the new features being announced now in 21 release wave 2 that are going to be mandatory. You can't switch them off. You need to be very much aware of that. So I think I and a lot of my colleagues, maybe you too, are going to be busy on the projects, making sure that the things that have been announced, the things that are going to be announced and being announced as becoming mandatory, that they are not a deal breaker. So which features would it be? The list is too long to put it in and discuss all of them, but I've highlighted it, and for your own sake, you should study the release notes this time around. Be very careful about next one. So this was the warning, and I'm going to repeat that several times, trying to remember to highlight this for each of the 5 or was it 6 areas that I'm going through. Becoming mandatory, right? That's sort of the decision. Okay, so what happened with the supply chain management, or rather what is going to happen? This is early days. So the structure that we would do these webinars in is that when we got these release waves, we need a little bit of time to prepare. Then we do a webinar thinking like this, and then over the next months, and then at the end of the release wave, when the next one is coming out, we'll have a look at what actually happened and then be able to demonstrate live. So this is new. This is sort of the inspirational webinar, and then over the next months, and then at the very least after 5 months, where we're sort of getting to the end of the release wave, then we'll have a look at the actual features, and with your input from our projects, we'll then have a look at what it actually was. Not always becoming the things that Microsoft wanted or we wanted or whatever. So it's always good to have a look in theory and then catch up in real life. It was not quite that way. Even better, or not as good as we thought. So the presentation today is basically from Microsoft themselves. So when it says we, which it will do in a lot of places, it's Microsoft we, it's not Academy. So I'm just here to present inspiration and the warning as well. So a lot of introductory this and that, you know about this if you've been working with that. So let's just cut to the real thing in here. The presentation was like this, and the tops in here, they have more than the bottom one. I think in planning and production information management, there is only a few things. One in production information management, and a couple of things in planning. Manufacturing has more inventory and logistics, as mentioned. It's got a bunch of things in there. There's quite a few exciting things with pricing and other things too. I'm really looking forward to get that. Unfortunately, that one is in 22, but I'm looking forward to have my hands on some previews or whatever on that, because that's something that our customers have been wanting for a long time. Same thing with the hybrid topology. Maybe you work with it already, but for the rest of us, I've included a few slides, basically from Microsoft stuff, just to visualize a few things. What is it actually you could do with those skill units that I mentioned in the webinar I had about 2021 release wave 1, where there was sort of the first mention of all this new stuff to enable on and offline help from your local resources, basically. So let's just have a look of this. So once again, some text mentioned from Microsoft, but let's just get on to the actual things in here. That we had these promises in the webinar session, and this is actually what we're going to have a look at. So Microsoft says we're going to make it better on this and that, but what is it then in here? Let's get on to the details. So the hybrid topology is that you're able to use distributed resources. So you're not just using whatever is at your Azure hosting center provider, you're using the cloud solution for Dynamics 365. And then, you know, once in a while, just like my Barcelona internet, it could be unstable, it could even break. So what's going to happen if everything is in the cloud? You're going to be in a tight spot. So solution could be using distributed things that will then synchronize automatically when you're actually back online. This is, to me, what it is. I know a lot of finer words to it and a lot of illustrations. Let's just have a look at that in here. So, distributed hybrid topology. So, the new things in here, and then I will just show some of the old news, what it actually was, and then I'll get back to the details of that. So, don't despair yet, please. This is the news. Then we'll get to the old stuff, and then we'll get back to the news in detail in here. This is an exciting feature, and the naming convention or whatever, absolutely fine. Distributed is a thing, basically. So you could then run things at your own facility in here. And when originally things came out with the skill units, me not being proper English, I had to think a little bit about what that was, because I thought, is this a weight or whatever is it? No, it's not. Basically, it's just a proper possibility of scaling, of increasing your possibilities of using local or central, or let's have a look at the slides in there of adding extra possibilities of speeding up things. And also, if you're going offline, then your local workhouse could still work. We had a look at that at one of the webinars I did in June, I think it was, but let's just have a look at what it is now. There's going to be some new things in here with better things with manufacturing work and better things with the warehouse work as well. And this text, and for once during this webinar, there is a little bit of visualization of things in. This is all new, so visualization, we haven't had time to do too much about that. Academy and Microsoft has done a few things. So back to sort of old news, what is the hybrid topology? Anyway, it's been available for quite some time, but it in the projects where I've been, not too many has actually used it for too long time, if at all. But the basic idea is that you would have the enterprise cloud hub at your Azure hosting center. Maybe that's just it. But then if you want to have some local resources, you could have that at some various steps. You could have, like if you had the things hosted in the US, you could have some other things being hosted in UK, and then at a local plant in Darlington or whatever it would be, you could then have some of the operational scale units in here as well. So central, sort of decentral, but still Microsoft hosted, and then at your own facilities, distributing the workload, making it faster to go through the internet, no matter how high speed connections there will be between the US and the UK. And then in your local facilities, you would then have your own, not snapshot, but your own representation of what this is. So should the connection between the local and the US hosting centers sort of bugger off, then you would still be able to operate at your local stuff in here. So that's the whole idea with this. And I think the idea, of course, is great, because there's a lot of dependencies on that. It's not very nice if all of a sudden you can't update on the warehouse or in production or in your retail shops or whatever. Retail shops, they will work with the local facilities for quite a long time, and retail shops now being commerce. But for the rest of us, this is fairly new. The first possibility of using that is just about a year ago, and now being increased with more things that could actually happen. Right. So possibilities, nothing that you have to do. The next slide is a good representation, so that on the last webinar with supply chain management as well, that you have the things being hosted in Microsoft Asia hosting in the US, and then you could have locally in Africa and China, or whatever it would be, in your warehouse or in your manufacturing site. So should you go offline, then you'll still be able to run. Now, what would the new things in here be? The new things in here would be enhancements, right? This is a new functionality, and as hinted when we started, quite often when there is a new functionality, and a huge one, which I think this one is, there is improvements too. So some of the things that has been added is that you'll be able to do sort of local updates, even if you're offline with your hub. So the skill units will be able to handle things in here with on-premise on workloads, or updating on material releases, or whatever it will be. More about that when we get to manufacturing. So more on the warehouse, more on the manufacturing execution, and we've got a topic later on about the manufacturing, and then we will see in more detail what it actually means, what the benefits would be of this release wave 2 improvement. So that was the news of the hybrid topology. More details is coming now, and as typically for this webinar, I've got a slide for each of these news. There's no way I'm going to have time to go through all the text. The text you can find pretty much the same way on Microsoft's release wave itself on Microsoft Docs. But presenting this will give me an opportunity to have my thoughts and for you to place some questions in the chat. Right. So the possibility of, this is the first of the three details in here, and as you see on the Microsoft website, there is a business value, and then there is, okay, what does it actually do? So this is sort of the marketing buzz about this, and this is why you should do it. And then we got things about the feature details in there. And when there's a lot of details to mention, I got this on the next pages in here. So as already indicated, run distributed workloads at your facility. So it doesn't have to be online with the hub. You could do it locally. Benefit, of course, if you're offline, and benefit could also be that things run faster. I know it can run fast when you're in an Asia hosting center, but once in a while, you know, if you got your own possibilities of doing things, that's why Microsoft adds services all the time, add-ins and so on, to take off the workload and then being able to do other things in other places. So integrated things in here. So you got the Microsoft Asia hosting, the Microsoft data centers in your region, and then locally you could have some operational units helping you if you're offline, but just making things move slightly faster. Okay, and down the same line, distributed workloads, yes, options in here and so on. details. And manufacturing execution, I also have that under manufacturing in there, and then with the slide about that. So you can use the warehouse mobile app, and that's actually, if you stay around later on in the webinar, I'll present a link to one of our on-demand videos, which you can, since you're participating today, you can have a look at that for absolutely free. Normally, it's part of our on-demand training, but in that, you'll see Andreas explain a bit about how to configure the warehouse management mobile app, which is so much in use, fortunately, by our customers in the warehouse. It can do so many things. Now it can do even more, as you can see in here, and as you'll also see when we get to the manufacturing. So stay around, and you get a link to, I think it's 7 or 8 minutes, but that it could take slightly longer to configure it. But that's the principles of how you configure the warehouse mobile app. Stay around with that, with Andreas' great video will be available to you at the end of this webinar. So you can register material consumptions for production batch orders. You can actually operate on the production orders themselves to start those, to start the batch orders. And some of the things, you know, you can say, hey, why wasn't that in from the beginning? Well, it wasn't, right? Not even Microsoft can do everything or everything right from the beginning. So learning by doing, learning by feedback from all of us, I think Microsoft is pretty good at that these days, then gets improved. And this is one of the places out of, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 lines in there, features, and then feature the features, so many things. So let me just move on, otherwise I'll never get through this in here. Register material consumption sort of speaks for itself. What is it actually you could do? So be aware of this is going to be possible soon from the warehouse management mobile app, which is such a great tool, I really think. So this is an overview of what it actually is and where it does add the thing. So this presentation you'll see one more time, but then I'll focus on the thing about starting production. But the things that happens at the hub, at the top in the blue frame, and then the things that happens at the bottom in the yellow frame could then be all the local things happening with the production flow execution interface, and then now being added on the mobile. We now got the raw material consumption stuff and more. And then I guess you guessed it already. If you've ever worked with this, then another out of the box thing, well, then that you can now start the production batch orders over here. So guess what? Got another slide, and on this now focusing on the start, the production thing over here, which is now going to be available on the warehouse management mobile app. More things about this that you can actually execute workloads over here being improved, enhanced, depending on where you are in the world. Another detail with this, with distributing the things onto scale units. It's big with the last release where we sort of getting it into public notice and so on, and now being improved and even more. So I think very good functionality, and good thing that more things have been added. I think there's still a few things missing, but it's it's getting good. Right. So this is with the warehouse work, including the warehouse management mobile app. You can now work on that too. So more things in here, but I have to move on. And the biggest topic of today, at least the longest list, inventory and logistics. This is huge, and there's so many good things in there. I have to focus on just a few, maybe because those are my own personal sort of pain points in the good old days and not so old days, but so good functionality being added, which a lot of my customers on a lot of the projects the customers has requested or even using external party tools to solve. So let's have a look at that. Page 1 of 2, right, indicates we've got a lot of things coming in here and not in details. So these 2 slides, I would say, is the most important thing. And then afterwards, I will do the same thing to you as I did with the skill units and all the things about the hybrid topology. browse quickly through this slide. Sorry, but there's so many things. So these two, at least, please stay alert for those. The global inventory accounting add-in, already thrilled about that last time around when I did a webinar, that there are so many things in the financials that is affected by what we do in supply chain management with the inventory. And also in the world outside our Microsoft Dynamics 365 supply chain management or 365 finance, there are some rules, IFRS or whatever, they don't always operate the way we would like them to, because they don't want us to use standard cost or whatever it will be. So the possibility is getting here with doing separate ledgers. These days we have only one ledger with the financial guys, but now we've got only one ledger in the legal entity in Dynamics 365. And now you'll be able to have multiple costing ledgers, so we could do things internally for externally reporting and other things too. That is great. It's always in past times. It's been a pain in the back to operate with just one ledger. Some of our competitor systems, no names mentioned, they could operate with multiple ledgers, so why couldn't we? But now we can, or we're going to on that. So this is very useful, and as it mentions and mentioned by Microsoft, this is especially useful for international organizations. And who isn't? If you're using Dynamics 365 finance operations, it's very likely that you've got an international organization. And that's one of the things that I think the system really excels at. That's the being international, really enterprise. And that's where I think a lot of the good things have been added with Dynamics 365 compared to good old AX, AX22All9, Acceptor, or whatever it is. Much more enterprise functionality. And now this, I think, has been missing for ages, to be honest. And now it's in here, and now it's going to be improved. So I'm not going to talk this much about all the various things, but this is me being in sort of the midfield between finance and supply chain management, being in both places. I really like this. Well, and the same thing for the inventory allocation in here, using the inventory visibility add-in. The inventory visibility add-in, add-in possibilities of doing extra things, perhaps with an extra service. That means there's so much more that you can do in your system, just the standard functionality. I think I'm out about that the last time around, the inventory visibility add-in for supply chain management too. Now there's more things coming with inventory allocations in here, with inventory allocation. Objects, read more about that in release notes. Software reservation. Now, when's the last time you have seen software reservation mentioned by Microsoft? In the good old days, we had reservations, and then we had marking, which always translated, by me at least, to people working on other systems, that we had hard reservation, software reservation. But I think, to be honest, maybe you could correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, I've never seen documentation mentioning software reservation terminology from Microsoft, even though the rest of the world is, okay, who's going to change Microsoft to the rest of the world? Well, now we've got the software reservation here, and I think that's fine. Okay, rebate management enhancement. Now, there's a lot of things about the customer and vendor pricing, discounts, settling, and other things too. And some of them, they operate on their own, making it slightly more tricky to work between those two. Rebate management being placed in special part where I think it doesn't belong. Anyway, it's really good. Now we've got a new workbench, and that means we could now, in that workbench, where you could pick up things that floats around in the system, I need to settle this, doing some things. You can now settle this with the deduction workbench, using that on the customer. So if you have some like calculated, accumulated rebate because the customer purchased this over a quarter, now you could use the deduction workbench to settle that if the customer already deducted it from a payment. And so I'm looking very much forward to that, because settling things is always a good thing to be able to do easily and quickly, if possible. And I think this is going to happen in there with that. This is not the only functionality, but that was the thing that I thought was really interesting for me, at least, with this. So now customer deducted, why was that? Oh, he knew he was going to get a credit note or deduction or whatever. He just took the liberty of deducting himself. So now we could settle things. Anyway, on page number 2, landed cost. Landed cost is a thing that I always talk a lot about with inventory accountants or controllers and so on. Can discuss all those nickels and dimes or whatever it would be. Now there's much more in here about the import goods and other things as well. A big thing for me, I'm not sure how big it is for you, but a big thing for me is when we do inventory on-hand adjustments, we can now use reason codes. Reason code is a familiar term for us working with financials. We do that in financials. It's, however, somewhat more simple. Like when we reverse a check or we do credit notes or we do write-offs or whatever it would be, we can or we should, depending on setup, give a reason code. And that's all fine. But in finance, this is purely used for analytics. Now, nothing against analytics, I'm a big fan of it. But in finance, there's nothing like automatically being accounting for things. We've got a similar thing with some transaction types on banks, which could include some accounts and so on, but it's not reason codes in finance. So what do we get over here in supply chain management? We've got the possibility of our warehouse workers selecting account. No, they're not selecting accounts. They don't care about finance, but they select the reason code. And in turn, if they do a write-off because they bumped into a six-pack or they dropped a crate or a container was faulty or whatever it was, they select the reason code and then you have configured whatever the appropriate offset accounts should be for that stated reason. I think this is great. It's not huge, but I really think this is great because some of the things that we talk about all the time, also just last week when I was doing a week of training for some financial super users and so on, doing the things about the quality of the data that you have in the system would be the earlier you get the proper information, the better. And of course, the more correct it is, the better. So who knows about the reasons for the write-off or the warehouse guys doing the counting or whatever, managing the on-hand quantities? They're the first guys to know about why is this not good. If it goes through approval or not, that's a different story. But they know about it. They could give the reason. And then people in the background knowing about, okay, what does that mean from a counting point of view? They just set up these reason codes. So I think this is great. Maybe not huge, but this is great. And perhaps I'm biased because I work with finance and I see so many incorrect data coming in and ruining the so many good tools we have for reporting. But you know, you've got garbage in, reports are less useful. So this is one of, for me, in here for sure. And the next one, that's 2 thumbs up for me, really. The pricing service. Unfortunately, this is not coming around really until next year's spring, but then I guess I could spend an hour on that because defining prices and discounts, special prices, line discount, multi-line. Well, I know there's more tools in here, but we need this, right? There's so many things in the world today that makes requirements to be on your toes, agile. I think the buzzword is with Microsoft, and the pricing in Dynamics 365, I think, lacks just a little bit, to be polite. So now with this pricing service, I'm really looking forward to see what's in there. There's a lot more text about it, but overall, I think the flexible price attributes, as mentioned in there, that sounds really promising in here. And the omni-channel thing, you know, depending on how you sell it or whatever it would be in here. I know you got tools in commerce, but in standard Dynamics 365 finance operations thing, we don't have too many of all these. Sounds like great things in here. So let's see what's coming in. Okay, more things coming. I think there's just a couple of more things in here. The warehouse management mobile app enhancements. I mentioned already there were things happening in here. Now there's more like guiding instructions on the user customers level. step-by-step instructions and prompts or whatever it would be in a localized language kind of thing. And finally, the standard barcodes in here. This is, I think it's 40 years old, because I think I had it just before I left the business university, actually. This is standard barcodes in it. Now you can use it for warehouse processing in here being facilitated somewhere. This, I think, was the most important thing, and keep an eye on my watch over here. Time is running. So I did mention that these two slides for this part was the most important. Now browsing very quickly through the slides so you could, well, I don't know, please don't take a nap, but the details in here, I'm not going through all of that. So these are this is a list of the features being updated by Microsoft. So when you get through the release wave, you will find it in this sequence. I haven't grouped it because then it's easier for you to find that. So this is not in the way its importance or whatever it will be. This is in the way that Microsoft has listed it in the release wave. And this is where you could go find it, read some more stuff about it. I've got some slides in here, but to be honest, I don't have the time to get through all the details. I put my money in some of these ones in here. You might put your money in some of the other ones in here. But first of all, be aware of the ones that are going to be mandatory from next year, and then have a look at the ones that you think are interesting and go have a look at Microsoft Docs. I think for now, there's some good descriptions in here, and then some of the things are going to be available. Some of the things are already available, and some of the really good things are going to be available next year. Looking so much forward to those. So even though the detailed pricing model for sales price calculations is definitely one of my favorites in this release wave, I have to just sort of move on. So you see the business value in here, mentioned already, flexibility with all sorts of things in here, and then details on the next page, as mentioned. So I don't expect you to read this at all, but be inspired to have a look on Microsoft's website. What's going to be? Okay. When calculating the final price, looking forward to that. Inspect the details of the price calculation. That's not bad. And then even more with it's possible to do some extra systems. You know, these days you don't just go fix things, right? With the development model that we got in Dynamics 365. I think that's basically a good thing. But it also requires Microsoft to have some hooks or some places to have the possibility of APIs kicking in and helping you with do the things that, after all, Microsoft didn't think about the way you would like them to. So all sounds promising. Looking forward to this in 6 months or whatever it's going to be available. Collaboration interface, I'm all in for the collaboration stuff, and much to my surprise, not everybody among our customers, they are. Maybe it sounds scaring that our vendors are using Dynamics 365, well, you know, with the proper security and so on set up, which is, I think, fairly easy in this part, it should just work. So now there's more possibilities of your vendor says I'm ISO certified, so could I please upload my things in here with this, and also that they produce, I don't know, some kind of substance for your process manufacturing, and then they need to upload the certifications once in a while. Then you could use them for your stuff as well. So just kind of a smaller things in here. Now another big thing, and I'll try not to talk too much about this. Now I mentioned it already. Using codes connected to offset account. That should give some ideas to Microsoft guys in the financial development team, or the business process owners, or whatever they call them over there, because this I would love to see in finance. It's coming around now in supply chain management. Hopefully they talk during lunch or whatever, so it could be part of finance. Good thing, I would mention that. Okay. Now this, with the other details, I'm just going to flicker some screens. Sorry about that. So flickering screens for some time, including the barcodes. That was the last one on the list, but in this presentation order, it is not, because I took the sequence of Microsoft, right? So you can read more about the GS one. And if you don't know GS1, standard barcode, the most standard barcode I could think of right now, at least. They even got their own website, the organization behind this. Now, be aware of this slide, right? Because you got some mandatory things now with 10.021 and onwards. You got some mandatory things, so you can't avoid these. I'm not going to discuss if this is a good or a bad thing. Just going to say what it is. And then note the things that I mentioned in the beginning. Be warned that things are now coming to be mandatory from next year. So some of the things are being enabled by default. You can be manually disabled. And then the ones mentioned in there, they're all going to be mandatory from 2022 release wave 1. So I guess from like March, April, and then over the next 6 months would be my guess with the usual frequency of the release waves. So be aware of these areas apart from the distributed hybrid topology thing. Then you could then have in each of the other ones, with inventory logistics, and also with the next ones, we'll see manufacturing and so on. We'll see mandatory things coming. So at least you should be familiar with that. And I just got to tell you, they're going to be in here, but you can see from my counting in here, there's so many. There's, once again, no way that I've got time to go through these. So cost management, 4 features, inventory management, 10, warehouse management, 11, and procurement and sourcing, we got 6, and in sales and marketing, we got 1. So that will be like 30 or so features. They're going to be mandatory. So they're turned on, but they're going to be, you're going to be able to disable those if you want to. And then from next year, you won't be able to disable those. So what I would do is I would sit down and be very careful about understanding which ones it would be, the impact, what it would be, and then talk to the customers and of course doing tests of what it would be. I'm sure Microsoft has taken a safe bet on that this would not create any bad will among all men, but you need to be on top of things in there, right? Mandatory things. Anyway, be aware of that. Software installation, as mentioned already, just some blah blah of the visibility add-in, and as mentioned, I'm not going to do the details over here of that. So basically, I'm just browsing on, and I'm not going to be mentioning too much, but I am all in about this. I mentioned that before, and I'm going to mention it again. I really like this idea. From my point of view, it's huge. Maybe because I've heard so many years when been doing pre-sales workshops or whatever, why don't you have multiple ledgers for? You don't. Oh, now we do. I know, old news. Okay, just browsing through whatever happened in here with this and Microsoft release notes. I mentioned IFRS doesn't always appreciate standard cost at all. A lot of our customers, they do, especially in manufacturing. But when you need to do the reporting, going external, no, now you can do it internally in Dynamics. Now, soon you could do it. Mobile app, step instructions, making it easier to do things in here, and the thing about translating this, the instruction going in the local language, mentioned already. And then catch rate, rebate management, other things over here. I mentioned already, rebate management and the deduction workbench now could work together. Rebate management workbench, that's new. And you know, the workbench is kind of like a parking lot for things that you need to sort out, being on settlement side or whatever it would be. So it's all good. Okay. Lander cost, mentioned 2 things about this already. The new lander cost module, which I have to admit, I haven't had the time to work too much, you know, not being pushed too much around by customers. Then you put it aside and you have a look at that sooner or later. So I'm not spending too much time on that. Part task in the warehouse, mentioned mobile app. This is small. Why wasn't it before in here? What does it do? It enables you, you know, when you walk down the park and you have a look at, oh, I'm going to pick this or that, then there's nothing in here. So you need to stop and then go find it. Where is it then? In which location, which bin or position, whatever, which location is it then? And then you have to come back. But now you can sort of park what you're doing right now and say, hey, wait, and let me just have a look. And then you come back. Small thing, why wasn't it here before? It makes the things, the flow, so much better for the warehouse worker. And we all want to do that, don't we? Increasing productivity and also increasing that, hey, this is annoying. It is. Well, it was. So now you could put on hold, have a look up, or is it then continue doing your picking and so on. That's a completely different experience. Small thing, but I really like the small things that increases productivity. I'm very much in favor of that. Some of the big things we never get, so we don't have the time, we don't understand it, whatever this, maybe that's why I like it. It's easy to understand, easy to see the benefits. Low hanging fruit, really. Right, inventory allocation in here, as mentioned in here, a lot of improvements for that too, and some of the things about setting off this so you can fulfill your most profitable channels. So you've got differentiated prices or whatever it would be, and then people, they want to buy it. You got some ones who would like to buy it at a higher price. Who do you want to set? Long list, more long list, and so on. Let's get to the last couple of things in here with manufacturing, with the planning, and with the product information management as well. Not too many things in here, right? The huge list is an inventory analyst just it's not quite a never-ending story, but it takes a long time to get through all the details. I didn't, but it still took a long time. In manufacturing, I think mentioned already, and this part too, is going to be, you know the story by now, it's time for a warning. So in this, there will be some of the features which are switch on, but you could deactivate those, and then they're going to be mandatory. We'll see that in just a second. Face recognition sign in. Why did we have that before? But you know, that's what could say about a lot of features. You walk in on the production floor, you've got gloves on in many ways. You got the gloves on, and you're going to push the keyboard or whatever. Face recognition. You got it on your laptop, and it does work sometimes, but now we can have it on that. Oh, well, it's in here. Let's see the details just later on. And it's good. And then more in the interface on that, working it easier. So what I've done with the updates in here, I've edited to shorter text. Just be aware of that. This is one of the places where I really want to put it to you that I've edited this text because it's very long. In some other places I've edited too, but then it didn't matter too much. So once again, the warning stuff, right? This is going to be turned on, but you can switch it off, but no, you can't switch it off next year. So be aware of what it is. And I think in here, I think I'm all in for that, but you have to be aware of what it is. It's going to affect your projects. It's going to affect your systems around. So in all these areas, once again, be warned about things becoming mandatory. The guides too. Okay, so the face recognition, I know a lot about security, personality things, and so on. Some workers don't want to do that. That's all fine. You have to switch. You could just switch it off, or they could switch it off. And also, it is not a photo that's it. It's a map. So you know, I don't know how much you know about how face recognition works. I don't know much, but it's not taking photos. It's scanning to see if the nose looks like it does, or too bad it does, but it looks like Finn anyway. And you know. Okay, you're logged in. So it doesn't save the photo, it saves a map, a scanned points or whatever it is. And even if you don't like that, they could switch it off. Now there is, it's going to happen in 2 steps. Microsoft seems like they're not going to complete this. So you still have to punch a button sort of to get started. And after that, you could sign in here. So that's the bottom words. I guess it should be in final print. In this release, the worker needs to make 2 touch interactions to sign in. In the future release, we plan to introduce a touch sign-in experience. So when I got to that, I said, oh, okay. Well, it's better than nothing, right? So maybe you got the big button, you hit that, and then you can scan your face, but you still have to. Oh. They'll fix it later on. And just the map thing that I mentioned to you in here, and protect the worker's privacy. So they can say, no, I don't want that to happen. I still want to take my gloves on and then punch in. More possibilities of doing things on the execution interface in here. Details, details, details. Planning overview. Planning, there's not much this time around. You know, the last time around, it was huge with the planning optimization kicking in from, what was it, March and so on. It's not the full Monty, and as usual, then over the next releases, there'll be some optimization, about the tool. So what's going to happen is basically just some improvements. Well, justice might not be the right word. There's nothing huge features or whatever happening in here from my point of view, at least. But the planning optimization getting better, and now being able to use also for your planning capability planning in here, you know, with all the Gantt charts and so on. And the usual warning, a warning about the planning features in here become mandatory with 22 release while in here. Parallel firming, well, what's wrong with that? Progress visualization, great. Auto firming for planning, okay. And forecast on details in here. Yeah. So I guess with this, as with the other ones becoming mandatory, well, we'll probably say that's kind of fine with me. Maybe not you, but you need to know about them. Finally, the easy one, the product information management. Not much in here, but still. So what are the news in here? It's basically, that's not a one-liner, but it's just a few extra things in there. Navigate to bombs and having things about country origin management. And there's one thing in here, small thing, right? There's one thing in here that I wanted for ages. When you set up default order quantities, why are you able to override that on sales order, purchase order, and so on? I know, depending on how you set it up, right? But now you could then make it kind of strict. So if you're buying 6 packs, I'm getting kind of thirsty. If you buy a 6-pack or whatever, you want to buy 2 6-packs or 3 6-packs or whatever it would be. So you have perhaps a default order quantity of not 1 6-pack, but 6 pints of beer or soda or whatever it would be. Basically, I like that there could be set up some strict control of the default order quantity. That should have been there. Well, it's in here now, so no more complaints about that. That was going through all these changes in like 52 minutes, and there's a lot of them. Please do study yourself the details. This was inspirational. And the exam changes, they're more transpirational, I guess, to some at least. And remember that even if you're certified, now you have to get to a renewal every year. Well, if you got your certification before, what was it, the 30th of June this year, then it is valid for 2 years. If you got your certification after, from July the 1st, I think it was, then it's valid for 1 year. Then you have to not do a new exam, but do sort of a renewal of that. So just want to highlight this, that the exam has changed. Not much, but I just wanted you to be aware. That is reflected in our live online course. In the next one is in November, and it is being reflected in our on-demand as soon as we get a chance to update. It is currently being updated, and it will be updated with these exam changes too. So what is it then, Finn? Well, slight changes only. So when you have a look at the topics, the groups, the sections, or whatever you call them overall, you can see they are the same. So 20-25%, 15 to 12. Where are the changes, Finn? They're coming in the planning optimization. It is still on the same percentage. It's the content that has been modified ever so slightly in here. So pretty much the exam is the same. There are a couple of new subtopics or whatever you call them inside these sections in here. So some of the things is now changed from like terminology implement to configure. I guess it takes slightly more deep knowledge on that. And then a few other things as well. So name changes, being more specific to planning optimization, and a topic group of implement additional spelling error. Implement additional master planning features, should have said, is now gone. Basically, simple changes. Okay, getting to the question and answer session soon. Just before that, just want to remind you of the things that I mentioned to you. We got the next open live online class we have on November the 22nd in here. The usual stuff, you get the full Monty virtual machine, Dynamics 365 running for 6 months. You can practice on. You get the Microsoft official course where the scope pipe, you get the practice test from Measure Up, and you get real-time support from our experts, yours truly, Andreas, whoever our instructor would be. Hope to see you in that. Right, free video, not a pretty slide that we normally do, but a free video it is. The one for the setup of mobile devices. I talked a lot about mobile devices today, so I thought it would be a good idea to use this one as a free video sample. So this is for you guys. Thank you for being here. And this is a free short lesson, 7 minutes, I think it is, where Andreas mentions some of the things like mobile devices in his usually excellent teaching style. Calm methodology is perfectly fine and will be on top of this after you start that. It's only available for a short while, so please don't hesitate to have a look at that. When you got 7 minutes, plus minus 10 seconds or whatever it takes to get this one started. That was it for today, and then I'll just have a look in the chat box. So sorry, I'm looking away from the camera to see if Alison highlighted any questions from you guys that we should have in here. And okay, I can see a question and a slide that answered the thing in here. So thank you very much for mentioning that. Okay, not a question, but a guy from Brisbane. I want to go back. I've been there a couple of times and I like it very much. Hope to go back next year, because I think the Aussies don't like Danes coming around these days. So maybe next year. Already talked about that. And yeah, Sydney, want to come back to sitting next to the Opera House, having oysters and champagne or whatever it will be. Now, I better stop before I get carried away with that. Not so many questions over there. Wasn't answered already. So thank you very much for being around, and hopefully see you live online course, one of our webinars or some other places. Just a few links on the slide right now. And thank you very much for being around. Hope to see you next time around. Don't forget the free video in there. And then don't forget to be on our next webinars, please. We've got more coming, and nothing new has been announced yet. We just need to get to grips with how we're going to handle these release waves in here. We got some projects for Microsoft universities and other things going on. But keep an eye on our website. The best thing you could do is to sign up for a newsletter if you aren't already. Enough said. I think trying to finish ahead of schedule for once. Thank you very much for being around, and have a great day, night, or wherever you are on that. Finn from Academy out of Barcelona, where the sun is shining right now. More work to do, however. So thank you for now. I'm out. Join us next time around. Bye-bye for now.